Right, in this video for the skills technical training for graphic design, today we're going to be talking about die lines. And specifically in the marking, you're going to find this under 2.6, 2.7, and to some degree the bleed as well. But we're going to focus mostly on 2.6, that the fold lines and die line are present in the layout and that the glue area is free of ink. These two are worth a few points, and it's very important that you get it correct, set it up correctly so that you can deliver your die line in a way that's not going to affect the final artwork in a negative way. I'm just going to show you up in the requirements where it's also listed, I believe on page 3. You will see we're going to be looking at a popcorn box here, and you'll see that under colors here we have process for color with one color for the die line. That's how it's specified. And I'm going to show you the correct way to set up the die line so that this will output correctly for the printer. So I'm going to show you both Illustrator and InDesign. In Illustrator, here's an example of the popcorn box. And in this particular design, you'll see that we got some layers here. And we have the die line sitting on a layer above everything else. And that is correct. You want to make sure the die line is separated, that it's on its own layer, or it's at least above the rest of the object, so you can see where it's going to cut and where it's going to fold and all that good stuff. This isn't really a lesson about what a die line is, hopefully you know that, but how to set it up correctly. So currently, if I was to select the die line, I'll just press Command A here and select it all. You can see that it has been set to a red color. And there's nothing wrong with that when you're working on it, but you would not want to keep it that color. You'd want to change it before you do your final output. And so right away, what we'll do is we'll go to Window and we'll go to Separation Preview, and let's just take a look at that color. You'll notice right now that I'll just zoom in a little bit so you can see here. If I zoom in and I'm looking at this die line that's sitting above everything, you'll notice that it has become a part of the artwork. Okay, it's actually become a part of the artwork, and that means when it goes to print, this line will be actually visible on the print. And so you don't want that because, again, this is just a guide for the printer as to where it should cut and fold. So we need to set it up a certain way in order for this to happen. And we're going to start by going to our window swatches. And I'm going to create a color for it. Okay, so in swatches down here where you got a little plus, we're going to make a new swatch. And I'm going to call it die line. Okay, I always name it die line. I'm going to set it to a spot color, and I'm going to set it to 100% magenta. That was the way that I was taught, and I stick to that. So this now is going to be very bright, vivid. You're going to be able to see it clearly, but it's most importantly, it's a spot color. Okay, I'm going to hit OK. And I'm going to select my die line once again, and this time I'm going to set it to the swatch that I just created. And you'll see now that the color of the die line becomes this magenta. It's very bright, and it stands out a little better. But more importantly now, in our separation preview, we now see it as a separate color. So I can actually turn off or turn on just the die line alone. Okay? But we still have a problem. The die line currently is part of the artwork, and if we were to turn it off, we would end up with a white area under the die line where it was. And that is a problem because, again, you don't want to have a white line where it's supposed to cut. So to fix that, you once again would select your die line, and again, it's already set to the die line spot color. But you need to go into Window Attributes and make sure that the stroke here is set to overprint. Okay? And what that's going to do is it's going to tell Illustrator, in this case, that that line should actually be printing on top of the artwork, not as part of the artwork. So I'm going to turn that off now, and you will see that the artwork is not affected by the die line anymore. Okay, so once again, let me just show that again. If I turn off overprint and I turn off the die line, it knocks out of the artwork. If I do it, select it, and overprint it, it does not affect the artwork, okay? It will basically it'll lay on top of the artwork without affecting it in any way. And that is the correct way to do a die line, all right? Now, let's say we're working in InDesign. We have a similar issue here. We're going to be creating a die line in InDesign, possibly. Generally, die lines are done in Illustrator, but that's okay. Same process. We got our separation preview. This one's actually already set up correctly, okay? And you can see it's working just right. Okay, we got the line. But it's the same process. You would go to swatches, and that's actually under color in InDesign. Okay, and you would set up your swatch here, exactly the same as Illustrator. And to set up your overprint, you got to go into a slightly different window here under Output, and you'll find attributes inside of Output. And now you would select the object and set it to overprint. Okay, so this would work as well. Same process. But it is very important because, again, if you do not set this, your artwork will not be correct when it goes to the printer, and your die line will not look correct. All right? So hopefully that helps.